Welcome, everyone. I'm Keen Southern. I'm a composer, and I wanted to welcome you to this little video series I'm doing where the idea is to bring you into the compositional process from the beginning to the end of it. So not just a after the fact explaining of what I did, but taking you on the journey as it's happening. And you will sort of get to understand the compositional goals and things I'm trying to do, the um, false, attempts, the mistakes I make along the things I try out that I end up not using, along with the things that I do find as steps to lead me towards completing the piece. Um, so you'll hear sort of the about all the things I'm trying to figure out and the ways I'm trying to solve these compositional problems and put the music together as it's happening. Um, so this is the first one where we're at the start of this compositional progress process for writing this piece. And then I'm going to do several more. I don't know how many more because it depends on how quickly this process goes. Sometimes it can be very slow, and sometimes it can be quite fast. Um, but to do these videos at periodic intervals after I've made some progress, so you can follow along that creative process and see how the idea and the conception of the piece has changed and how it's grown all the way up until the completion of it um, when I turn it in to the performers. Um, so that's the idea here. And so the piece I am doing this with, and I'm going to take you on, well, I don't have really a name for it yet, but for this year, I is my first year of 2 years as the composer in residence for um, a wonderful professional chamber choir in Kansas City, Missouri, called Te Deum, which is led by their music director, Matthew Christopher Shepard. I've written one piece for them so far. Well, the agreement is that I would write two pieces per year for a total of four pieces for them. I wrote my first piece, which was for their holiday concert, which was a setting of the Sussex Carol, which you might know. Um, on Christmas night, all Christians sing to hear the news the angels bring. Now that piece I had a lot of fun with. I wanted to write something. I've written a lot of slower um, homophonic, which is more choral music before, and I wanted to do something different. And this was an opportunity to do something fast and fun. And I really pushed the choir to their limits in terms of what they could handle, with a lot of very complex harmonies, very complex rhythms. And they did a really, really wonderful job at it. But um, they won't have as much time for this next concert, as much rehearsal time to devote to my new piece as they had for that one. So they've asked me to do something that would take less rehearsal time for them, so something that's a little bit easier. Um, and the concert this will be for their concerts around Memorial Day in May. Now, as I'm recording this, this is in January 21st right now. And the deadline, the ideal deadline to turn the piece in is March 9th. So I have about a month and a half to write this piece. The other parameters they've given me are, so Te Deum is a 24 voice choir. So they are a mixed choir of sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses, but they can handle some divisi, dividing those sections. Um, and Matthew also told me, we could do double choir, something like two choirs, break it into two groups. Um, and also that timing wise, it should be about 4 to 6 minutes, roughly. And the other thing is that they have asked for a cappella works, so unaccompanied. Now, writing a cappella works, I love doing that, but it's a really fun and beautiful challenge of how do I make sure that they can find their notes without any sort of external pitch reference from an instrument that can give them their pitch. They have to find their pitches from their own notes and from the other notes in the choir. Um, that restricts me in some ways, but it's a really fun challenge to have to make sure that they can find their notes. And so with those restrictions of 4 to 6 minutes for this Memorial Day concert, um, I had this idea of writing a piece. So last year I wrote, was it last? No, well, I finished the year before that actually. Um, I wrote my largest work, my largest choral work called The Requiem for Animals. And in the Requiem, I set as the last movement, it's called In Paradisum, which was also set by other composers who've done requiems, very famously, for instance, Fauré. I think Duruflé has an In Paradisum. It's actually not part of the Requiem Mass, it's part of the funeral rites, the graveside uh, service for the dead. Um, but I love the imagery in this, and I was thinking, even though I said it in the Requiem for Animals, I think I want to make a different setting of it for this. Usually that would be a real sort of turnoff for me of setting the same text or even the same text of a a piece by another composer that I really, really love, that I feel like they've already done it, so set that text so beautifully. How could I, you know, top it or compete with that? Um, but in this one, I have a sort of different idea about what I can do with this text rather than do the same thing I did in the Requiem. Um, so I'll show you that text and talk about what I'm thinking with that in a second. But the other idea is that idea of a double choir. I've written a choral piece for 8 voices where you divide each section, the sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses. So there's 2 parts for each of those sections. But the idea of a double choir where 2 separate choirs, not just one choir that's each section is divided. How do I make those feel like 2 different choirs that are interacting rather than just each section divided, so one choir with 8 parts? And I had this idea that came to mind of, again, thinking about this. Well, let me show you the text for now, actually. Um, I love this imagery. So this is the In Paradisum. You should be able to see this now. The original Latin text and the English translation, I'll read. May the angels lead you into paradise. May the martyrs receive you at your arrival and lead you to the holy city, Jerusalem. May choirs of angels receive you, and with Lazarus, once a poor man, may you have eternal rest. I love this imagery of this choir of angels receiving the souls. Um, and for me, the idea to write something that is this heavenly choir of angel music. And I had this idea with the double choir of having um, each choir sing simple chords and having them swell in and out. So one sings a chord and it starts very soft and gets louder, and then it sort of fades away. This sort of and having that overlap with the other choir singing another chord. So you get this overlap of the chords and the overlap of the choir alternating. And that for me was a really interesting musical idea. And that's the musical idea I'm starting to explore. And It's also not going to be too hard because these are going to be simple chords, much simpler chords than a lot of the ones I used in the Sussex Carol, for instance. Sorry, I'm getting over being sick, so I've got a lot of junk in my throat I'm still dealing with, and you might hear my voice is pitched a bit lower. One of the nice things about, probably the only nice thing about getting sick is now I'm a true bass, and I can hit notes that I couldn't hit, I can't hit when I'm healthy. Um, Otherwise, being sick is not fun. Um, so anyways, yeah, this is the text I'm thinking about using. Let me show you. So the first thing I started to do after I had that idea of the two choirs singing overlapping chords was trying to figure out the particulars of how those would overlap and what I want to have happen with those two chords interacting. So let me show you this. Not that yet, but this. Okay, you should be able to see. This is actually a picture of a sketch I made out by hand. So I create my scores in a computer program, notation program, to make them look nice, but I do um, some initial sketching out by hand in a little notebook, which has staff lines in here. So I can, but here I'm not even using pitches and stuff. I was just sort of graphically writing these out. And so let me try to explain what I was trying to do here. So you see some of these that are crossed out. These are the ones that I realized didn't work. I was not getting what I wanted. And then here's the one I finally figured out, and I'm happy with how this is going to work. So each of these is actually this whole thing together. So this is one choir up here, and this is the second choir down here. These are just how many beats. And this is a crescendo. So they start there, and how many beats they're going to crescendo, how many beats they're going to hold that louder dynamic, and how many beats they're going to have for fade away. And then this is a rest right here. So one beat of rest. And I'm trying to figure out, yeah, when should the second choir start? How much should they overlap? How much do I want the volume level of the chords to be the same, or to be like how do I want them to interact? Um, and I kept trying, and also trying to think about the practicalities of when are the singers going to breathe? How long can they go on a breath? Are they going to have enough breath to do a crescendo smoothly and then a decrescendo at the end smoothly? I can't make it too long, or they're going to have to sneak a breath, and I really don't want them to have a break like that. Um, So I started doing this where it was four beats of one, the first choir crescendoing, and then the second one crescendos while they hold, the first choir holds that at the louder, but that didn't sort of line up right. I did the same sort of thing here, and I was trying different lengths of things. Here's two beats of coming in, a whole two beats of holding, but I also want this evenness between the choirs, that each of their chords are, you hear each of the chords by themselves for enough time, but you also hear the overlap of the chords enough time, have enough time for that too. And so I was trying 5 beats plus 4 beats, 5 beats of crescendo, one with a rest at the beginning, and none of these were working. Um, 3 beats and then four, and here I didn't write out all the beats, but I just wrote the number of how long it takes. 3 beats of crescendo, 4 beats of holding, 2 beats of decrescendo, and then a quarter, 1 beat of rest. That wasn't working either. Finally, I figured it out. I did one more over here. That didn't work. 4 beats of the first choir crescendoing on a chord by itself. So you get 4 beats of hearing that first chord. Then they fade out while the second one is coming in. So you get 4 beats of overlap. And they sort of cross at the same dynamic level after 2 beats and then fade away. So you get 4 beats of the first, 4 beats of overlap, and then 2 beats of the new chord. But it's at the peak volume. And those 2 beats, the first choir will rest, and then it crescendos for 4. So it's actually, the whole thing is not divisible by 4, it's divisible by 6, I think. Um, and then you start, this is what gets repeated. The two beats of one resting while one's holding, and then four beats of overlap going opposite dynamic ways, and then four beats of overlap. Or six beats. Yeah, so it's a 6 beat sort of cycle, actually. Although I think I'm going to keep it in 4/4 to be simple. Um, Finally, this is the right balance between the two. So let me actually show you. I started sketching this out now in the notation software, so you can see what this looks like. And by the way, I'm using Dorico. For 20 years, I used Sibelius, and now I've switched over in the past year to using Dorico, and I'm still getting used to it, but there's still a lot I'm learning with it. But I think it has some really nice advantages over Sibelius that I like, but there's still a lot of unfamiliar things for me. So these chords that I have put in here, I'm not sure I'm 100% happy with. Um, but so they might change, but I just wanted to sort of pick some just to hear a little bit actually of the playback, because the notation software can play this back with these synthesized sounds. Um, and so I wanted to just be able to hear, instead of just imagining it in my head, the crescendos and decrescendos, I wanted to be able to hear that being done externally and make sure that is exactly what I want. So for instance, here the first choir plays this, it's a major chord, an F major chord, 4 beats crescendo. Then choir two comes in on a D minor chord, which shares one of those notes but has two new notes. So you have this interesting overlap, a more complex chord that is created by the combination of those two chords. While it gets to its peak forte, you have the other choir rests for 2 beats. And this is at a pretty slow dynamic. I chose, or sorry, tempo marking. Quarter note equals 48. 48 beats per minute. Now 60 beats per minute would mean 1 per second. This is a little slower than that. So a little more than a second per beat. Probably about 1.3 seconds, 1.2 seconds per beat, something like that. And then the first choir comes in on a new chord, a B flat major chord against that D minor chord. Those overlap going opposite dynamic uh, directions, crescendo versus decrescendo for 4 beats. And then that reaches its peak while choir two rests for 2 beats. And then it comes in on this is a G minor chord, so G minor overlapping with the B flat major, and then going to another onto a C major. Um, I think I'm pretty happy now with how this overlaps. Let me show you how it's. Yeah. So I really like that. And you get the sort of when one chord is at forte and loud, the other one sort of sneaks in and you're sort of like, ooh, what is that? And then it gets bigger and you get this transfer between them where they one, yeah, fades out and the other one fades in. I really quite like that. So now the things I'm trying to think about as I go forth on this are they going to be singing text here at the beginning? Or are they going to be using syllables, ah, ooh, something like that, that are non-texted syllables? Um, I've been thinking about the idea of just that chorus Angelorum. Well, so actually, I think I want to use the text in English. So in the Requiem, I used it in Latin, although I used other English text to balance that, so that whenever you heard Latin, you knew you were hearing the text from the Requiem Mass itself, and then in English, it was from outside texts. I've been thinking about using just those two words, chorus angelorum, which is 6 syllables, chorus Angelorum. And it's a variety of syllables too. It's a variety of vowel sounds that are held. And I kind of like that variety. So having it sort of being passed between the choirs. So the first one, call, and then the other one call come in rus, angel. You get a lot of different vowel sounds, which gives it a sort of different flavor to it. And you probably the text probably won't even be very intelligible. Um, because of how long these notes are held for and the overlapping of them too, that you might not hear the consonances at the beginning because it's entering soft while the other one is holding the chord. But I like that sort of being the basis of it and having the for the sonic qualities of it. And then after maybe doing that twice, I'm trying to think about how many times that and how long this first section of the overlapping chords should be. Then I think I'm going to have a middle section where it goes through more of the text. So the thing that sticks out to me with the text here, I really like this. May angels lead you into paradise. May the choirs of angels receive you. I love those parts the best. I've always been kind of confused with this Lazarus thing. Like, why is Lazarus in here? Why is he mentioned in here? Um, it seems a little strange. I might cut out Lazarus, but the granting eternal rest. May the martyrs receive you. I think I might keep that, but that's also a little strange to me. Maybe that's with Lazarus as sort of martyr, although he was a martyr, right? I don't know. But a middle section that sort of presents the text much more clearly. And maybe ending with these overlappings again in a different way at the end. Um, that's what I'm sort of thinking about right now. And thinking about what that music for the middle section will be also. As of course thinking about it as this kind of how can I make it as heavenly and beautiful as it can be. The other thing is I'm sort of imagining these with the overlapping choirs in a very sort of resonant cathedral like space. I don't think we'll I don't think the concert's going to be in a place that's resonance, but man, that's what I'm sort of imagining. And having, a cathedral space where the delay or the decay of the sound takes several seconds. Oh, it would just be glorious, having it be done in a space like that. Um, so that's the ideas I have right now, and where I am right now, on January 21st, 2026, with about a month and a half left to figure out the rest. So I will do some work on this. I will come back in, do another one of these videos and share with you, um, where it is and at that point and what things I'm running into there, what things I've figured out, what things I'm still trying to figure out.